What if you could plant food once and harvest it for the rest of your life? Native farmers already mastered that centuries ago. They grew roots that returned every spring, nuts that regrew after fire, and grains that reseeded themselves. Some still grow wild, quietly feeding forests today. Why did we abandon crops that never stopped giving? Number 9. Jerusalem artichoke. Few plants caused more confusion than the Jerusalem artichoke. It's not from Jerusalem, and it's not an artichoke. The Dakota and Pawnee called it sunroot, a plant that looked like a sunflower but hid its treasure underground. They grew it near lodges and along riverbanks because once planted, it multiplied on its own. Even fires or frost couldn't kill it. When Europeans arrived, they mocked it, thinking it was too wild for farming. But by the 1600s, French settlers carried it across the Atlantic, realizing each root could produce 5 to 10 new ones in a single season. It became so prolific that colonial farmers later tried to ban it, calling it a weed that ate the field. What they saw as a nuisance, native farmers saw as security. Its tubers were packed with inulin, a natural sugar that feeds gut bacteria and lowers blood sugar levels, a discovery modern nutritionists now call ahead of its time. And while potatoes died in the ground after one cold snap, the sunroot kept growing, pushing new shoots through frozen soil each spring. In a world of crops that need constant work, this one refused to die. But while the sunroot ruled the soil, the next crop climbed upward, twisting through forests with quiet genius, offering food in two forms at once. Number 8. Groundnut. Long before beans or potatoes arrived, forests of the Northeast were full of groundnut vines. The Wampanoag and Narragansett taught colonists to dig their roots, small, brown, nutty tubers strung like beads beneath the soil. What they didn't realize was that each vine gave both beans and roots, two crops from one plant. Historians note that during the starving time of 1609, settlers at Jamestown survived on groundnuts gathered from riverbanks. Yet, as soon as trade routes opened, they abandoned it, calling it too earthy. Ironically, modern tests show groundnut holds 3 times more protein than potatoes and grows without fertilizer. It stretches quietly underground, repairing soil and fixing nitrogen naturally. Native farmers knew its rhythm. They never harvested all of it. Some roots always stayed behind so the next generation could eat. That patience made the groundnut a living pantry, steady, hidden, and unstoppable. French explorers once called it the plant that follows you home because every tuber left behind sprouted a new vine. And from these quiet forests of plenty came another treasure, one that arrived with spring snowmelt and a smell sharp enough to wake an entire mountain valley. Number 7. Wild leeks. Every spring, when snow still covered the ridges, the first green to push through was the wild leek, or ramp. For the Cherokee and Shawnee, that bright shoot meant winter had ended. Families went into the woods together, digging carefully so the bulbs could regrow next year. The smell filled the air, sharp like garlic, sweet like onion, and strong enough to chase off illness. These greens were more than food. They acted like medicine after long winters of dried meat and corn. Each bulb carried vitamins A and C, iron, and natural detox compounds that cleaned the bloodstream. Early settlers called it Indian garlic and wrote that whole villages feasted on it after fasting, believing it restored balance to the body. Over time, ramp festivals began in Appalachian towns, echoing those older gatherings. People still hike miles to find patches hidden deep in the forest. One patch, once rooted, can last decades, multiplying each year under fallen leaves. That's why tribes treated it carefully, never pulling the whole plant, only part of the patch. The ramp didn't just mark a season, it told people the world was alive again. And when spring turned to green floodplains, another plant followed, the one that curled like a question mark and carried the taste of the wild rivers. Number 6. Ostrich fern. The Abenaki and Mi'kmaq waited for them like clockwork. When the ice broke and rivers swelled, Young ostrich fern fronds curled tight beside the water, green coils wrapped like springs. Those coils, called fiddleheads, were gathered fast before they unfurled into full leaves. Their flavor sat somewhere between spinach and asparagus, bright and earthy. Each plant came back from the same root crown, year after year. Once harvested gently, the patch returned every spring, a natural garden beside every stream. Villages boiled them, salted them, or dried them for later. Modern studies found these tiny spirals hold more omega-3s than kale and high doses of antioxidants. Early French explorers called them forest vegetables and traded them along the coast. But the real secret was balance. The people never took too many. If you stripped a patch, it vanished. Respect kept the food alive. Even today, some families trace gathering spots for generations, knowing exactly when the rivers give their first greens. And when those rivers dried into plains, another root ruled the heartland, one that fed armies, traders, and entire nations through the wind and dust. Number 5. Prairie turnip. Across the open plains, before fences or highways, people carried one food more than any other, the prairie turnip. The Lakota called it timpsula, meaning life root. It grew wild in the dry earth, deep roots twisting through clay where no crop should survive. When everything else failed, this root held on. Women were the experts at finding it. They walked miles with digging sticks, searching for its thin, curling vine above the ground. Each root looked small, but one gathering could feed a whole camp. It dried fast and stored for years, turning into a powder rich in fiber, calcium, and natural sugars. During long hunts or war journeys, a pouch of timpsula was survival itself. Explorer Lewis and Clark wrote about it in 1804, saying native guides offered sweet, nut-flavored roots that gave more energy than meat. Scientists later confirmed it held more nutrients per ounce than modern potatoes. It grew without care, without plows, without needing anything from humans except gratitude. Elders said the prairie gave this gift freely, if you didn't take too much. Every season they left some roots to seed again, keeping the land fertile. The prairie turnip turned scarcity into strength. And as plains stretched into forests again, another plant waited in the shadows, one that hid under trees yet fed whole towns. Number 4. American hazelnut. When cold winds hit, most plants slept, but the American hazelnut stayed ready. Its branches bent low under snow, holding small brown shells packed with oils and protein. Tribes across the Midwest gathered them through the first frost, cracking hundreds at a time beside fires. These nuts were fuel for the long freeze. Each handful carried 600 calories, twice that of corn. The Ojibwe mixed them with dried berries, while the Potawatomi stored them with maple sugar. Some crushed them into paste for traveling food. Every part of the tree mattered. The bark made arrows, the wood wove baskets, and the leaves covered winter caches. Early settlers wrote that native families guarded hazelnut groves like treasure. They knew each bush produced for decades and regrew fast after fire or cutting. The plant didn't need plowing or watering. It simply returned stronger. Modern scientists studying wild hazelnuts found they enrich the soil through fallen leaves, keeping forest floors fertile. They are one of the few native crops still used today in breeding programs for disease-free hybrids. Through centuries of storms and settlers, the hazelnut kept thriving quietly. And when the ice melted again, the forests turned golden with another native crop, one that flowed sweet and clear from the trees themselves. Number 3. Maple. Long before sugar mills or candy, tribes across the Northeast had a secret season, the maple moon. When winter broke and days warmed, they cut into maple trunks and watched drops of clear sap fall into wooden troughs. That liquid looked like water, but when boiled, it turned into sweet syrup thick as honey. The Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Abenaki made it a yearly ritual. Whole families camped in the woods for weeks. Children carried buckets, Elders tended the fires, and the first syrup each year went as an offering to the forest. They didn't call it food, they called it a gift from the trees. Sap season lasted only 4 to 6 weeks, so timing mattered. A single mature tree could give 40 gallons of sap, which boiled down to just 1 gallon of syrup. Too much heat and the sugar burned, too little, and it spoiled. Generations learned the balance by sound. The hiss of boiling sap told them when it was ready. When settlers arrived, they copied the process, but used metal kettles. By 1800, maple sugar became the only sweetener that didn't come from enslaved labor in the Caribbean. It powered a quiet rebellion through food. Every drop held sunlight, snowmelt, and patience. And while maple forests fed the spirit, the wetlands nearby guarded another secret: grains that grew on water and could feed empires. Number 2. Wild rice. Among the Ojibwe and Menominee, wild rice wasn't farmed, it was harvested like a ceremony. The lakes turned gold every late summer, covered with floating seed heads. Canoes slipped through the shallows, 2 people inside, one steering, one using wooden sticks to bend the stalks and gently tap the grains free. Each canoe could fill several sacks a day. The grains dried in the sun, then roasted over fire to remove their husks. What came out was light, smoky, and full of energy. 1 pound fed a family of 4, and it could last for years if stored right. The Ojibwe called it manumin, meaning the good berry. They followed its growth for centuries, guided by a prophecy that told them to move west until they found food that grows on water. They did around the Great Lakes, where wild rice became central to trade, ceremony, and survival. Scientists later found that wild rice holds twice the protein of white rice and grows without fertilizer. Its deep roots also clean lakes, pulling toxins out of water systems. So when colonists tried to drain those wetlands for farmland, they unknowingly destroyed one of nature's best filters. Each harvest wasn't just food, it was protection for both people and the planet. And in the deep desert to the south, one final crop waited, one that refused to die even under the burning sun. Number 1. Mesquite. Every dry wind that swept across the southwest carried the scent of mesquite. To outsiders, it looked like a scrubby desert tree, but to tribes like the Apache, Pima, and Tohono O'odham, it was a full pantry hidden in plain sight. Every part had a purpose: the pods, the sap, even the thorns. When summer hit and the rivers dried, the pods ripened golden. They fell by the thousands, filling the air with a sweet smell. Women ground them into a fine flour using stone mortars. That flour held 3 times the protein of wheat, packed with calcium, fiber, and iron. It lasted for months and gave steady energy without sugar spikes. Hunters called it desert fuel. The tree itself gave more than food. Its deep roots, reaching 150 feet underground, pulled water and nitrogen up to the surface, keeping the soil alive for everything nearby. Even in drought years, mesquite kept flowering, feeding bees and animals when no other tree could. Spanish explorers wrote that native families baked mesquite bread that tastes of honey and smoke. Later settlers burned the wood for charcoal, unaware they were destroying a food system that thrived for thousands of years without irrigation. Modern nutritionists call mesquite a future food. But for desert nations, it was already the past and the future, standing firm against every sun and storm. Each pod carried a lesson. Life doesn't wait for rain. It learns to grow through dust. And as that dust drifts across old fields, the story circles back. Ancient crops, still alive, waiting for hands wise enough to plant them again. Thanks for walking through the gardens time forgot. Subscribe if you love stories where history still grows under our feet, because the next one uncovers seeds older than any written